get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar of best practices for interview and how to navigate the U.S. job market. My name is Maggie. First of all, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever part of the world you're joining us from. Thank you for being here. My name is Maggie. Like I said, I'm a business development and placement coordinator here at EduConnect. And now I'd like to introduce our director, Jessica, and she'll tell you a little bit about herself and the program.
Great. Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name is Jessica Record, and I'm the Executive Director of EduConnect USA. And EduConnect USA exists to provide a layer of assistance for international students who are looking to study and work in the U.S. So we are work and study experts. We try to find ways so that students can maximize both, so that you can have earn your degree, but also gain the practical experience that really helps you practice what you're learning in school. So we provide assistance from beginning to end. So connecting students, finding the right program, navigating the admissions process, which can sometimes be really challenging. We also provide support and assistance in the visa process. We work with students who are outside the U.S. looking to come to the U.S., sometimes for the first time. And so it's that traditional visa process, finding, securing your interview, making sure that you feel comfortable when you go. We also work with international students who are in the U.S., who are finishing a program, whether it be ESL or a degree program. And we can provide assistance on finding their next step and their next work opportunity. And then we also work with non-immigrants who are looking to be students. For example, those who are here on J1 visas as interns and trainees who would like to continue working in the U.S. but also earn a degree so that they can level up their work experience as well. The other layer of support that we provide is career development. So everything from assisting students in finding internship and preparing for one. So making sure your resume meets the standards for U.S. employers. Sometimes there's a lot of cultural differences, and that's the area where we really step in to help. So a resume, what a U.S. employer is looking for in a resume is really unique and different from other countries. And if they see something outside of what they're expecting, they might set the resume aside. And same with the interviews. So there's certain things that in the United States we kind of take for granted. It's so embedded in our culture. But when you're coming from outside culture, there's some things to note that Maggie's going to go through today that's really going to help you stand out in your interview. So make sure that you take good notes from what Maggie's going to present today, because Maggie is working with students continuously, trying to connect them with employers and making sure they have a successful interview process. And so the things that she's conveying to you today are things that she knows from experience from students. From the feedback that they've given from their interviews, from the feedback from employers. And these are things that you can incorporate when in your next position that you're looking for. So thank you so much, Maggie, for putting together this webinar. And also, while you're listening to Maggie, if you have questions about anything in the presentation or about EduConnect or about the programs that we offer, please type them in the chat, and we'll have time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So you can do that throughout the presentation. We won't answer it in real time. We'll save it for the end, but please feel free to type your questions as they come to you. Thank you so much, Maggie.
Thank you, Jessica. That was an amazing introduction of our program. As we go on through our presentation, you can expect to learn a little bit about how to answer commonly asked questions in interviews, about timing and the professional presentation of yourself and your body language, and nonverbal cues that you can look out for that aren't always communicated or verbalized. So as we get into part one, you've probably heard in every interview you've ever been in, tell me a little bit about yourself. With this question, the interviewer is trying to get an idea of you and how concisely can you describe decades of life experience that you've probably had. So a really good skeleton to practice for this interview, or for this question in particular, is your academic background. So where did you go to school? What did you study? If it's most relevant to the role that you're applying for. What is your professional background? What experience do you have that mostly relates to the role that you are interviewing for again? You can put a little bit of your hobbies. And finally, you want to put your future goals, mostly aligned with the position that you are interviewing for. So for example, I'd answer that question by saying, I hold a degree in hospitality from San Diego State University, where I developed a strong foundation in hospitality. I've worked in customer service for the past 5 years, starting in retail and most recently as a front desk associate at a boutique hotel. Outside of work, I enjoy traveling, and I'm passionate about creating memorable experiences for guests. In the coming years, I hope to continue my career in hospitality. So if you heard carefully, in those parts, they're broken up into 4. I talked about my academic background. I talked about what I have done for work previously. I said a little bit about me enjoying traveling as a hobby. And I put in there that I want to pursue a career in the field that I'm interviewing for. And this example is in hospitality. Perfect. So now we can go on to the next part. What are your strengths and weaknesses is going to be a question that you're also most likely going to hear in an interview. In this one, you want to choose a strength that is relevant to the job you're applying for. For example, if you're interviewing to be a front desk agent, you wouldn't want to say that your strength is being really good at basketball. Although that's really amazing, you want to keep it relevant to the job that you are interviewing for. And it's really amazing practice if you can support your strength with a specific example. For example, you can say, I am really good at caring for my community. For example, in college, I gathered a group of my friends and we did a cleanup of the campus. So you can make this applicable to the role that you are applying for. That's really good practice. For the second part, for the weakness, you can choose a real weakness, but not one that's going to disqualify you from the role. For example, if you're applying for a role that is customer facing, you wouldn't want to tell the employer that you have a short temper. Although that's something that you can work on to fix, you definitely want to make it something that you are, that's going to make you look good and something that you know is fixable and steps that you're taking to improve upon this weakness. So an example of this would be an area I'm working on is being more assertive and being able to prioritize tasks. In the past, I've had trouble saying no, but I've found a way to organize the priorities and what is most critical and go working off of those steps. So you can say that you in the past have struggled to prioritize, but you found a new system to overcome it. Perfect. And so we can go on to the third very common question. What are your career goals? So for career goals, you want to show alignment with the role that you're applying for. You want to include short-term and long-term goals, and you want to keep it realistic and attainable. So an example of this would be, my short-term goal is to further develop my skills in front desk management and guest services. I see this position as being an opportunity for me to grow in this role. Ultimately, I'd like to attain more roles in management. And yeah, you could leave it at that, short and sweet. Another thing that I'd like to touch on is being able to answer a question like, why do you want to work here? But before I do that, I'd like to invite Jessica if she has anything to add.
Sure. No, these are really good questions. And like I mentioned before, these are, and it says on the slide, these are commonly asked questions. So as Maggie is assisting you with these questions, and you'll have access to it recorded, a really good best practice is to write these down and to refer to these slides like Maggie has here and answer them on paper and rehearse them because you know they're going to be asked. They might not be asked in these specific words. They might change it a little bit, but they're going to ask you a version of this question. And so you don't want to be caught off guard. So everything, Maggie's kind of giving you the secrets right now. So as she's going through this, and not right now, but take a note of all of these, answer them for yourself, and kind of rehearse them so that you know that you feel comfortable when you're asked these in person.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, so another question that you can expect to hear at the end of an interview is, or towards the middle, is, why do you want to work here? And this is to emphasize that it's really important to research the company and the role that you're applying for. So being able to say a fact that's not maybe commonly known about this business or organization that you're applying for, and being able to tie it to a personal experience. An example I referred to is if you're applying to work at Kaiser Permanente and you know when they were founded and you know that they helped aid soldiers in World War II, you can say, my grandfather served in World War II and he was able to get the health medical attention that he needed to live a long, healthy life and be a hero for our family. Anything like that. So if you can draw an interesting fact about the company or the role that you're applying for and connect it to your life and why it is that you're interested in working there, that's going to set you apart from a lot of people. All right, something that's going to be super valuable for you just in general, not even just in interviews, but in general, is to be able to answer a situational question or a behavioral question in STAR format. So STAR is an acronym for situation, task, action, and result. So a situation is a happening, something happened. There was a situation and you explained the context of it. What was the task? What were you responsible for doing? What actions did you take? What were the steps? And what resulted? What was the outcome? So I'm going to give you an example of how these questions would be formatted. It would be, tell me about a time. So someone says, tell me about a time you overcame a difficult customer, or you had the most challenging day at work. And you can say, last year, I was working as a front desk agent at a boutique hotel. One evening, a guest arrived, very upset because their reservation had been canceled due to a technical error. So that's the situation. You're setting up the scene. The task is, what did you have to do? So my responsibility was to manage the guests' frustration and find a way to accommodate them despite the overbooking and ensure that they left satisfied, right? So what did you do to make those things happen? I first listened carefully and empathized with the guest's situation. I apologized for the inconvenience, acknowledged their frustration. I then asked if the guest would be willing to have a seat and wait while I explored alternative options. I then called a partner hotel. I booked them a room. I set up the transportation and offered them a voucher for future stay at the property. And what was the result of the situation and your action? It was that the guest was, although initially frustrated, they were able to leave satisfied, and we were able to retain a customer. I think that is, if there's any other examples that you, Jessica, would like to add or add on to this slide.
Not a specific example, but I think this really illustrates how individualistic the HR employers are looking for. And sometimes that's really distinct from students' previous experience. They're not looking for a specific answer. They're really looking to learn about you as an individual. So all of these things that Maggie just mentioned, this acronym, the STAR, talking about your very personal experience, that's what they're looking for. There's no right or wrong. If you're able to talk about this, that's going to be key. And just to mention something that I've heard a lot in the past, as you're answering these questions, sometimes students in the past have told me, I don't want to brag. That is a very cultural thing. In the US, it is not bragging to promote your achievements, as long as your tone is correct. In the US, bragging denotes, a kind of like a negative tone. trying to show off, but the HR employer is actually asking you they're looking at several people and they want to know why you, out of these 4, 5, 6 people they're interviewing, are the person they should pick. So it's okay, and it's very important to be able to present yourself and represent yourself using this acronym. That is okay. That is not considered a brag. It's exactly what you're expected to do.
Perfect. And now we'll go on to the second part, which is going to be about timing and professional presentation. So something to emphasize in this portion is punctuality and how important it is in American culture. So you want to strive to arrive 10 to 15 minutes prior to your interview time. Say your interview is at 11 a.m., you want to come in at 10:45. This includes accounting for traffic and being able to check in and settle yourself so that you're not rushing going into the interview. Another important thing to note, and why it's so important, is that it shows respect for your time and for the time of the person interviewing you. It shows professionalism, reliability. So someone can say, I can depend on this person to be at this place at this time, which also correlates into work. So can I expect this person to finish a work with a certain deadline? So that's basically what it would tell an interviewer if you were to show up late to your first interview. And then another thing that you can practice is being concise. Take into account that interviewers are going through many interviews per day, and so you want to be as short and to the point as you possibly can. And avoid, that was a good example, avoid using filler words such as like or am. If you need a second to think about how you want to answer a question, feel free to pause. If you're going to need a little bit more than a few seconds, say, can we come back to this question? There's always a way that you could gather yourself without using too many words, and always try to get to the point. Another thing to take into account, mainly if you are dealing with online interviews, is time zones. So the US is one of a few countries around the world that has many time zones, and we're going to go over a couple of them in the next slide. So these are how different states are taken into portions and how their time zones work. We are in California right now, so we're on Pacific time. If you're in New York and you're setting up an interview with someone in California and it's 9 p.m. for you, it is 6 p.m. for us. So just always remember, it always helps to do a little bit of research and time conversion. And it's really best practice when you ask people what is their time zone, especially with this new environment of remote work and a lot of globalization, like work internet connection. Perfect. So we can go on to our next slide of timing and professional presentation, more so the presentation of the self. So you want to present yourself in the best way that you can. And first impressions are very important. So if you're going to talk about an accomplishment, perhaps having a certificate, or if you want to show a particular thing on your resume and you want to point it out, having your resume on hand, any important documents, anything that you would want to show to support your case is really helpful. Also, prepare thoughtful questions for your interviewer. And we'll dive a little bit into this after I tell you it's also important to rehearse your introduction. So however you want to, all the questions that we've gone through so far about the commonly asked questions, tell me about yourself. Don't be afraid to practice those in the mirror, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your teachers, whoever will listen. Definitely just speak as much as you can. And going back to the questions that you can ask an interviewer, most of the time at the end of an interview, you'll get, do you have any questions for me? And you can take this opportunity to talk about or to ask about the role, the team, or the company. And I'm going to give you some examples right now. You can ask about the role by questions such as, how does this role contribute to the company's overall goals and objectives? What does success look like in this position? And what are the biggest challenges that someone in this position would face? You can ask about the team. what are the strengths of the team? Where do you see an opportunity for improvement for the team? You can also ask about what is the company culture and what are the company values. You will most likely be able to find the values of a company on their website, but it always could be a good talking point to discuss one of them with the interviewer. And also you can say, what are the developmental opportunities I would have at this company? Another thing is your physical appearance, dress code. So you definitely want to dress more professional than less. You can mitigate most of this misalignment by looking into the company that you're applying for and what people are commonly wearing. And then you want to dress just a step more professional than that. I guess always be clean, polished, make sure your clothes are well fitted. And that should cover most of it. Anything to add?
Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to add on to was the important point about do you have questions for me? And that is something that I hear from students feeling a little bit shy, feeling that maybe it's not their place to ask questions, and it's the reverse. So when you have questions for your employer, it shows a couple things. It shows, like Maggie mentioned earlier, that you know about the company and you want to learn more about the company, you know about the position. It shows that you're really engaged and that you're interested. So be sure, like Maggie said, to ask questions about the company. And that being said, that goes along with what Maggie said before. You need to make sure you've researched the position and you've researched. The question for the company should not be, can you tell me more about the company? Can you tell me more about the position, right? Unless it's specific. But they expect you to know that coming in. So exactly like Maggie said, ask those specific questions. How it aligns to, the things that the specifics that you're looking to learn more about. So it is definitely encouraged to ask questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. Next, we're going to go on to body language and nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues means things that you're not exactly going to hear, but you're going to be able to pick up on. And this has a lot of correlation with US culture. So I know that in some cultures, making eye contact with your elders or people that you don't know very well is not considered polite. But in US culture, it demonstrates confidence and engagement. So when you're looking somebody in the eye, they're able to tell a lot about you, that you're willing to look them in the eye, that you're confident, and that you're listening, and that whatever you're saying could be genuine. Genuinity could be told from eye contact also. And it just shows your interest and it builds trust and rapport. Another thing to note is posture. So you want to avoid things that may come off arrogant or uninterested. Crossing your arms can look cool sometimes, but you don't want to do that at an interview because it shows that you're maybe closed off. Crossing your legs, just sitting or crossing your legs is also something to avoid. So you want to put your feet on the ground and stand up straight, back straight, just as engaged as you could possibly look. Another thing to note is you don't want to be yawning or looking tired. You want to show on your face, and we're going to touch on this a little bit more, but happiness, smile, and positive engagement on the part of for the interviewer. Anything to add?
No, that sounds good.
Awesome. And because it's so important, it has its own dedicated slide, and the importance of smiling in American culture. So America is uniquely one of those countries that has a lot of different people from around the world, thankfully. And so you're able to bridge that gap with just warmth, and a smile is very much encouraged in order to build those relationships between different cultures and different people. Also, it shows optimism and just happiness and excitement to be there. I know that smiling at a stranger can, in some cultures, be weird or uncomfortable, but I want you to get used to it when you're in the US job market because it's very much encouraged.
The only thing I have to add is, Maggie's talking about at your interview smiling. That is a huge note we get from employers, a huge one. Why didn't they get hired? They didn't smile. It's not just about that interview and getting the job. They're looking because that's the behavior that they want you to have with the American customers. So being able to demonstrate that in your interview means you'll be able to demonstrate that in your job. So if that's something that's a little hard for you, make sure that you're thinking about that. Make sure you maybe practice it, like Maggie said, in the mirror. But that's a big note that we get. So that's exactly like Maggie said. That's why it has its own slide.
Perfect. Another thing to note for cultural differences is avoid trying to do excessive gestures. Sometimes we talk with our hands, not fidgeting, just being calm, arms at your side or on your thighs, wherever you're most comfortable, and not crossing your arms, as we've discussed before, as to not look defensive. Also, practice active listening. That means when you are listening, you're not preparing for the next question, although that's good. And if you need some time to think, you can do that. But actually listening to what the person is saying so that you can respond after understanding, if that makes sense. Yeah, anything to add?
No, that's good.
Perfect. And that brings us to our conclusion. And if there's anything you took away from this presentation, I hope it's that you can master interview questions by practicing them. Most of the time, you can prepare for 60% of the questions that you're going to be asked in an interview. And it just means you repeat, you practice with as many people as you can. That goes into the fourth point, practice mock interviews. Anyone who's willing to give you the time, even if it's a friend, just be sure to answer those questions to yourself, understand what you're saying. Also, make sure that your body language is communicating that you're engaged and that you're interested. And also just be on time, present yourself in the best way possible, make the best first impression, stay calm and think. Don't feel like you have to rush through anything or give too much information. And best practice, although not always available, is to email, to follow up with the HR person or the interviewer and say, thank you for your time. Here's a recap of what we discussed, what I learned. That goes a long way. That's going to help you stand out. And if Jessica has anything to add to this, more than welcome. If not, we're going to go on to the Alliant slide and tell you a little bit about the university that we partner with. Oh, Jessica?
Yes. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the Alliant?
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So everything that Maggie said about the interview preparation is so key. And like we talked about with EduConnect, our focus is on work and study. So the way currently that we connect students to the best work and study opportunities is through our partner university, Alliant International University. And the reason we work so closely with them is because their vision is very aligned with ours. So they are a professional practice university offering graduate level degrees. So students come there to study, but also have the opportunity to train while they study. So when you graduate, you have a degree, but you have that practical training experience that allows you, that's what employers are looking for, right? They want the degree, but they also want the actual experience when you're getting hired. And the way that Alliant supports that for international students is through CPT. So you're able to work while you study. And Alliant is unique in that it offers day one CPT. Alliant also has STEM eligible programs, which allows international students to extend. You have CPT while you're studying. When you finish your degree program, you're eligible for OPT, which is optional practical training. At Alliant, CPT is integrated into the coursework. So every student has to meet that requirement. It's not an additional class you take. It's not an additional unit you have to pay for. It's expected in your coursework because it really enhances what you're learning. Following your graduation, you have OPT, which is occupation or optional practical training. Alliant, it has STEM eligible programs, meaning that if you're enrolled in a STEM eligible program and you have a STEM eligible job, that you can extend your 1 year OPT for an additional 2 years. One of the most popular programs that we partner with Alliant is our Executive MBA program. And that meets the needs of a lot of our international students in that they want to work while they study and have the day one CPT. The Executive MBA has a flexible schedule that allows you to do both on the Alliant side. Alliant has set that up. Also on the EduConnect side, there is an Alliant, a grant for that program, as well as a payment plan. So a biweekly payment plan to assist students in paying tuition. And then also with the program is placement assistance. So you'd be working with somebody like Maggie to help kind of evaluate your previous experience and help connect you to employers so that you can get to the interview stage and perform exactly like Maggie suggested. And Alliant has other programs as well, but that one's our most popular. So including DBA and PhD programs. There's also opportunities to transition from the master's level program to the DBA and PhD, and Alliant makes that really easy. They call it a fast track program where you're able to use the credits that you have in your MBA that you're taking and transfer them over to the DBA and PhD, so reducing the amount of courses you take in that program. There's also Masters of Science programs. So there's MS in Information Systems Technology, Healthcare Analytics, and Data Analytics. And those are all STEM eligible programs. So you have the option for day one CPT. And then if your position at the end is STEM eligible, you can apply for STEM OPT. So that's a little bit about the partner university. And at that point, we're going to stop and I'll pass it back to Maggie. Maggie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Perfect. So I see some questions coming through. I'm going to address them one by one. So the first one being, what are some good questions to ask in an interview to show interest in the company? So that's a really good question. Going back to depending on what it is that you want to learn more about, whether it's the role itself, the team, or the company. A really good question for the company-wide is, what is a core value that the company embodies very strongly? What would you say, or what's the vision of the company? Where do you see this company going in so and so years from now? So those shows that you are really excited about the prospects of the place that you're interviewing for. And you also would like to know what they're doing well. If you're looking for something a little bit more like maybe you're looking for where they have room for improvement, you can ask the same question in that way. What is a core value that you're working to strengthen on as a company, of course? And you can also just, you'll be able to find some more questions and answers depending on the sector that you're interviewing for. I hope that answered your question. What are we gonna have a same employer in CPT and OPT? That's a good question. That may be more of Jessica will be able to add on to that, but we do encourage that you remain with your employer for CPT and OPT. Jessica, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So I think you can think of it in a couple ways. So absolutely, I think it's a very good, it's yes, you can have the same employer for your CPT and OPT, and it's a really good choice. It's a choice that you can make. The reason that I say that is the longer that you stay with a company, American companies are a little bit different than other countries. So I know, especially with our students from Europe, they're used to progressing in their company on a time basis. So for the first year, you're in this position, then you get promoted, then you spend 2 or 3 years in the upper level of that position and you get promoted, and it's time based. In the US, it is not that way. So this is a confusion I get a lot when students say, well, I was a supervisor at my last position. Um, in the US, it is so much more important that you fit into the company and you fit into the team. So it is not uncommon, it is frequent that you may be placed in a position that's a little bit lower than you've had in the past. And that is okay because they're going to test you out. In the US, though, you also have the possibility to be promoted so much faster than in some other countries. So if you are a good fit for the company, if you are a good fit for the team, you'll be promoted. So we have students who, if they stay with the same company, can rise really quickly within those few years. That being said, um, there is such an element of choice that you have. If it is a good fit for you or not, you can change employers. Uh, but everything that goes with that, it's finding a new job, doing the hiring process again. So it is an option, and it's really what works best for you. I think it's the nice thing you have with EduConnect is that resource. So if you're thinking of these things, you can always reach out to Maggie. Um, and while we are answering questions, I'm going to change to the slide with her contact information. So you have lots of time to get that down. But she would be a great person, and please feel free to reach out to her to ask these sort of things throughout your career journey, because she can kind of help guide you if it's a good choice or a bad choice. Sometimes it's really hard to know.
Perfect. Wonderful. And I saw a question just come through. What will happen if a student cannot find any property for CPT or no hotels, resorts are interested in your resume? Jessica, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. So the nice thing about EduConnect is that's kind of our role to help you get connected to those companies. So we have a lot of resources at our disposal, and Maggie is constantly, like, part of her role is finding new opportunities for our students. So you're not on your own. So know that, first of all. Second of all, though, we cannot guarantee employment because it is up to the hiring manager. So it's, whether you're hired or not is up to the company. But I can tell you that what Maggie spends a lot of time doing is, if something is not working well, and that is why she's here on this webinar, something is not working well, we're going to evaluate what it is. You're not on your own. So maybe it's something in your resume. Maybe something is not standing out. You're not even getting an interview. Maybe you're getting an interview, but it's not progressing. These are all things that you can talk to our placement team, like Maggie, and review. So she'll ask you, like, what questions were you asked? What are some things, what happened? Sometimes it's just not a good fit. Sometimes it's nothing that you did or did not do. It's an employment decision. But Maggie would be able to assess that and maybe give you some tips um, to do something better. So we I think, we'll assist you, but will also help empower you. So make suggestions to you on ways that you can look on your own. Um, I can tell you the US job market is doing really well. A lot of people are hiring. It is a tight market, though, too. So it is something that you need to be open. That helps a lot, too. If you talk to Maggie and you say, I want a job but it has to be XYZ, it has to be in this location, this salary, this position, it's going to be very limited how we can assist you. If you are open and willing to take something a little bit different, the opportunities are going to be wide open for you. So we'll be able to find you with more connections. And then even getting that experience, we talked about the ability to stay for CPT, OPT, and rising up. The opposite is true too. You get experience at a company, you put that on your resume. If there's another position that you're looking for later, if you find something else, then you can use that experience to leverage another position too. So it's really dynamic. I don't have a one size fits all answer for you, but that's why we're here. So we can kind of give you some of that guidance and feedback. And Maggie, you're on mute.
There's an ambulance that was passing by and I forgot to unmute myself. But okay, so Mary's question, can we now work full time in the first year? So yes, you're able to do CPT from day one. That's a very unique program at Alliant. As Jessica mentioned earlier, it's going to be dependent on the school that you attend. But for Alliant, you can do your CPT from the first day of your courses. One thing to note though is if you do full-time CPT for 12 months, you will not qualify for OPT. So even if you have to do 11 months and a half, please be sure to keep it below 12 months so that you can qualify for your optional training. Another thing to note is full-time can vary. You may think that the most common known full-time is 40 hours, but there in most programs, it could be anything above, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jessica, anything above 25 hours. So you want to make sure that if you're working anything above that amount of hours, that you are registering for full-time CPT, and Jessica can add to that.
Yeah, and so we know at EduConnect, we know the regulations, the USCIS, the SEVP regulations forward and backwards. So we're happy to provide those to you. The regulations are one thing that's really unique is that for USCIS, for CPT, OPT, their definition of part-time and full-time is different than what employers have. So part-time for SEVP for your student status is less than 20 hours. Full-time is more than 20 hours. For a typical employer in the US, full-time is like 37 to 40 hours. So it's just important to note that. I would say too that even though we know our regulations, it's really important that you consult with your university, your DSO, your PDSO, because there's regulations and there's university school policy. So you're subject to both. You have to follow both. So when you have a question about work hours or anything like that, best practice is to talk to your DSO or your PDSO to make sure that you are doing the right thing. You have a lot of support. You have a team of people supporting you. At the end of the day, it is on you to maintain your status, meaning that you need to follow all the regulations to make sure that you are okay with the U.S. government. It's up to you. So if something goes wrong, it's on you. There's no one else you can blame. So you got to really take responsibility, but at the same time, use your resources. You have a team. So CPT and OPT, the key thing to note is to talk to your DSO and PDSO, because there are restrictions in the sense that if you're allowed to have up to 12 months full-time while you study. If you go over that amount, then it affects your OPT. So that's something that you need to be in communication with your school, your program director about. That is automatically reported when you get your paycheck to the government. So there's no way after the end of it that you can really kind of argue about it, right? Because it's communicated when you work. It's for taxes. Taxes in the U.S. So bottom line is make sure that you are using your resources and that you're communicating anything with CPT, OPT goes through the university's DSO and PDSO. So make sure that you have a good relationship with them so that you can maintain your status.
Perfect. Thank you. And last question, are we allowed to work graveyard shifts if the employer asks? That's a harsh word, but yes, you are able to work night shifts, whatever works with your school schedule. And if you're willing, there are no restrictions as far as I understand. There are no restrictions on which hours you're working, just the amount of hours that you're working.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the only thing I would add is CPT, while you're studying, is tied to your university program. So make sure that you're in line with the regulations of the school. So for example, at Alliant, you are eligible to do CPT as long as your grades meet a certain requirement. You're here in the US to study. So as long as you're meeting those requirements, there's not restrictions on the university side. So that's an example I give just to make sure that you are you're really responsible for yourself when you come, making sure that you're following all the requirements of the university, for the government. But in terms of hours, exactly like Maggie said, there's no rules or restrictions in the shift you work, the time you work, as well as the hours, with exception to that part-time and full-time distinction.
Perfect. And I don't see any additional questions, but if you have any, you have my contact information. Feel free to reach out to us through our website or anything that's most convenient for you. Oh, just kidding. One more. Oh, no, it's a thank you. Okay, great. Yes, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Jessica for all the valuable additional information. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I want to say thank you to Sam for the technical support, and everybody for joining us, depending on whatever time it is for you. So thank you, and I hope you learned something. And like I said, feel free to reach out with any questions.
And we'll be sure to send out this presentation. And the last thing that I want to mention is you have our website at the top of the slide. It's going to change. We have a new website coming out, so don't be surprised when you go back onto EduConnect USA that you see a completely new design and branding. We're also going to be adding a lot of resources. So all these things that Maggie is saying, we want to provide you with as much resources so that you can be successful. So keep an eye on our website as well so that you can, there'll just be things that can help you for your interview, for your resume. So keep an eye on that as we continue to grow. But yeah, to echo Maggie, great job. That everything that she presented to you is things from real life that she experiences with the students that she's working with. Thank you for attending, and I know that this will help you in the future.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.